Oh, hi.
We're live.
We're live. We're so excited today. This is Nicole's probably favorite topic.
It is.
So,
Amazing.
welcome to the Scoop. We're really excited to be back on. It's been a while. We've been pretty busy, but we're excited to get back on a monthly schedule. So we're planning. We'll plan out the rest of the year and do our best to keep on track. But today's topic is the adult programming and kind of the future of Sonnenberg and where we're going with that. So we're really excited. I wore this shirt. Yes, I'm a Cubs fan. But,
I am too.
so that's a bonus. But the reason I wore this is because one of our adults makes these shirts along with a couple of other things. We got some different things that are made.
Oh yeah, I have one in my pocket.
This is made.
So I asked her because there was like a plastic thing right here instead.
Oh.
So I gave it to her and I said, I want this to be pretty. And so this is what we came up with.
Oh, I know what you're talking. I want one
too. Yeah.
So it's like it looks
so
like
my key fob is on like something better than plastic.
Like this.
Yeah, like that. So we switched it out.
So that's the difference. Look at
that. So she asked what my favorite color was. I said yellow, and so that's what I get. So
yeah, I want one now.
Yeah.
So we want to talk a little bit about. I have some questions on it that I'll ask Nicole and go over, the history of where we're at, where we were, where we're at, where we're going to go. Is that cool?
Yeah. Awesome.
All right. So I think what would be good to start is why this is important to you, and why it should be important to everyone, quite frankly, and kind of where you came from, why, and how we got to where we are. Let's start there.
Okay. Cool? Yeah, you want the long story or the short story?
Whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I mean, where it kind of started was when we made the after school program here. We had kids that could really benefit from more treatment, which caused us to make our life skills program. So when we made our life skills program, a lot of those kids, their ages are between, like at the time, between like 9 and all the way up to like 18. None of them were 18 when we first started that program. But as you know, kids age into adolescence and then into adulthood. And so there was a gap in that area as to, well, where do they go when they turn 18 and what do they do?
Yeah.
And this population was one in which sending them to like an educational setting wasn't necessarily in the cards for them. They needed more like behavior reduction, replacement behaviors, learning how to be more independent, not needing that like one-on-one person there all the time to do kind of everything with. Okay. So that's kind of how it started, where they weren't individuals that could even go to like an independent living facility or anything like that. Nor did their caregivers feel that was going to be the safest decision for their family. In which case we started to make the adult program. At the time, there really wasn't anything around here either. So if they wanted to, like if the families wanted to look at residential facilities, they were looking like 2-3 hours away. Or they were looking across the border into Illinois, in which some of their Medicaid funding and things like that didn't necessarily like transfer over to all of the places that they kind of looked at. So with that gap, and those of you that know me know that when there's a gap, we fill it. And that's super motivating to me, is like that kind of challenging piece as to like, how do we do what's best for the individuals we service and allow them to continue down the lifespan. The most important piece of the adult population for me is their independence and everyone understanding that autism and their other disabilities like don't go away when you hit 18. And there's not a lot of like mentorship with caregivers on like what to do.
Right.
There's been a lot of families that like together we've kind of had to look at, okay, well, like no, basically what I'm saying is no one just says like, oh, here's all the funding that you need and here's
Right.
everything. They don't call you up when your kid's 18 and says, oh, here's everything.
Yeah.
You have to find it yourself. And if you don't know where to look or what to do, that can be very challenging and that can be detrimental to the individuals that we service, because then if they don't have like the funding or they don't have what they need, then
well, and it's limited.
It's very limited. I think that was our biggest struggle at first, was to find, and there's things that are still are, but to find the funding and be able to support that. Because again, on our end, not just the caregivers end, but on our end, they also don't just hand you like, oh, like use these billing codes and here's like all the funding and here's what you should do. No one tells you that. So you kind of got to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
And so there's been people that have been like worked closely with us that had backgrounds in like little pieces of this. So some of our employees had backgrounds in like adult intake and how that intake process works. Some other people that we've collaborated with like understood how like SILAs work or have done that. Other people that we've collaborated with have worked with that population and like what that looks like. So kind of using all of that together allowed us to kind of like move forward with this.
Yeah.
I also at the same time frame was in the middle of researching the adult population in general, and what increases independence and what that shows us. And so I created like my dissertation and everything that I've done up to this point on a mix of like the research, the application, and what that can look like. Mostly in a vocational setting is more so like what my research is based on.
Okay.
But we do a variety of things as BCBAs and being practitioners, is we also do the daily living. Like we're good at teaching that. We have systems and a systematic approach into teaching the daily living, and to breaking up skills into very small pieces so that there's success and that there's that like intrinsic motivation for individuals to see like, okay, I did this little piece, I can do much more.
Yeah.
Which kind of brings us to a whole nother avenue that I don't know if we're ready for, because that can kind of take us into the programming and like their reinforcement and how different it might be from other ages.
I think that's what I would be interested in knowing a little bit about. I mean, I think what I'm hearing you say too is when you look at what the adults need, it really, you go back to the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we got the programming in life skills and forward, right?
Yes.
And so I think I would love to know what's different about it in big, simple terms.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also what I've learned from you too is when you turn 18, the rules change.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are those rules that change?
Yeah.
Because they're adults now. So I would love to know about that. I think that would be helpful too. And then just a little bit about programming big picture, how that kind of happened.
Yeah. So when you turn 18, you talk about guardianship. So you either become your own guardian or you have caregivers that are your guardian. It also gets a little complicated because you can also have guardianship in like certain areas of your life and not in others.
Oh.
So you can make like maybe you don't have say over like your medical needs.
Okay.
But you do have a say over like where you live and like what maybe therapies you go to or what recreational activities you do or like things like that.
So who decides that though? Like, is that before you turn 18 you decide that? When you turn 18? Like, how does that work?
So parents, should probably plan for that before they turn 18, because when they turn 18, it's something that can go into effect. But if you don't plan for it prior to, then it kind of just jumps up at you and you're a little bit behind, because it is a whole kind of court system.
So how long before would you recommend?
A year.
A year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then does the parent make those decisions, talk with their child if that's something they can do? And when they turn 18, does it immediately fall to, if this child's an adult, they make their own decisions?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
So they kind of have to go through the court processes on that. And yeah, some parents can ask their now adult children what they want and don't want. Some have the cognitive ability to do that, and some do not. And so it's really just based off of some assessment pieces and kind of where they.
So does that fall into it then? Where parents could say, no, I need to do this because of, and here's the proof, so to speak?
Yeah, here's the diagnoses, here's the cognitive scale, those kind of pieces play into that.
So when those pieces are an in-between kind of thing, or the soon-to-be or the adult person that we're talking about, client learner, how do you work through that when you have someone that's like, no, I want to do this, I want to do this, and there's kind of the parent's no, that's not. What happens? Is that through the court system then? Could it literally be attorneys?
Yeah,
it could.
Okay. It could. Yeah, it could go down that route. What we collect on our end is that paperwork and that guardianship paperwork, because it will outline in that for us, what pieces they have, say over, for lack of a better term, and which pieces they don't.
Okay.
We also, through our intake process, and we're kind of revamping that a little bit as we learn more about guardianship and things like that. And the there's a lot of different scenarios that kind of pop up for us where we're maybe we should have something on that.
Okay.
Because we'll get release of information on whoever's guardian, either the individual is their own guardian or the caregiver is our guardian. And so whoever is kind of signs all of our documentation, because what happens in adulthood is that there's also a lot of other people that you need to collaborate with. Not to say that in adolescent or childhood there's not, but I feel in adulthood, you're looking at caseworkers, you're looking at nurses, you're looking at psychiatrists, you're looking at if they're in a residential facility or a home type placement, so who's in charge of that? And so you're looking at that, you're looking at transportation companies, you're looking at all these different variables that if there's not a nice collaboration between us and them and whoever has guardianship, or both, even if caregivers have guardianship, that doesn't mean that the individual isn't involved in things, right? So there's a whole paperwork trail of that, but just kind of making sure that you're aware of the whole individual, because there's also in adulthood you have a longer learning history, and so there also could be other diagnoses. There also could be a lot of what we're kind of seeing now is a lot of trauma and a lot of mental illness plays a part.
Okay.
So making sure that if that's out of your scope of practice, that you're also getting education around that and that you're able to collaborate.
Makes sense.
With that, so that you don't put in some programming that might be detrimental to other things that are going on with that individual.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so if they're adults now and they're their own guardian, right? How do you work with, how does that work when it comes to programming? I think this is the real big difference.
Yes.
Is now, can you talk a little bit about that and what is different about that?
Yeah, so everything becomes person-centered planning. And so what that means is that anything in their treatment plan is things that we collaborate with them on. That's not to say that if they say, oh, I want to come to therapy and sit and eat chips all day. Like, I mean, it's like there's some pieces to that, but it's a collaborative effort between like us and the individual on like what their day looks like, things that they want to work on, things that they don't want to work on. We also have like choice activities, which a lot of this stuff I feel like maybe should be in like some of the younger ages. I think it's just a little bit more challenging when you have like a child who can't like maybe doesn't know like their like rights, so to speak, or their choices. But there's things that we can give to children as well in this regard. But in adulthood, there's I guess there's less motivation when it comes to some like tangible things sometimes. So like for a child, you might be able to motivate them to like complete their work, for example, for like a gummy bear or for like a car or for like the cars on the car ramp, right? And not an actual car.
Well, I'm sure they've asked some.
But in adulthood, it is going to be that actual car. But if they clean their room, you can't give them a car, right?
Right.
So there's a difference in this like motivating factor when you enter into adulthood.
So how do you do that? Mm-hmm. How does that look when you're an adult and you make it? Because the goal would be to have them intrinsically be motivated, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's a goal from the beginning,
mm-hmm.
But especially as an adult, because they have like if they're their own guardianship, they can say, I want to eat chips all day.
Yeah, they can.
So like you said, there's some, you just went through that's, we have to, obviously we got to move forward and we've got to set goals. So how do you do that? And how do you make them intrinsically motivated to get a job or to live independently or to not do dangerous things, let's say?
Yeah.
Because there's danger, that's obviously number one is keeping safe. So how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, we pretty much start like our assessment type process is more of this almost like a motivating interview type process where we're more so kind of asking like, hey, like what do you want out of like life? Like we're not really talking about like this moment right here, like I need you to do this, so what do you want kind of thing.
Right.
We're talking like big picture in life, like why are you here? Like what's something that you want to do? And sometimes I would say 90% of the time, actually, I get answers in relation to friendships, relationships. I want to learn how to communicate, but I want to learn how to communicate so I can date.
Okay.
So there's a lot of like those types of responses. They might not respond with that right away. But based off of like other responses, you can kind of like get there.
Yeah.
So it's similar to how we would find out anyone's needs. Everyone has a need, right? Yep. So then it's the same with them. Like we just kind of have to pull out like what is that like true need for them and build goals with them around that.
Okay.
So like I have a client who he really wants to date. He really wants a girlfriend. And in today's age, it's all through technology. That's what dating is.
Yep.
But when you're somebody who lacks some of like the communication skills to go like back and forth in a he knows what kind of questions to ask to get to know somebody.
Okay.
But we have to like extend that to, okay, well, what's the plan? Like, are you going to invite them to the park? Like, and when is an appropriate time to say, okay, I know this person enough to invite them out, and setting up like that date is like the hardest part.
Okay.
And so to work on that skill, it's not just like we can say, okay, get on your phone and we're going to go on dating sites. We do that. But it's also like this, like kind of like, okay, well now we're going to role play like conversation and like things like that. And when we start down that route, we also notice some other things that come up for us, such as we don't like rejection, which no one likes rejection. Okay. But we don't have the skills to handle that type of rejection on our own without some help. So then we as therapists kind of point out, like, hey, so I'm noticing that rejection is really hard for you. Like, would you agree? And oftentimes, like, yeah, I would agree. And so then we go through and build goals together about rejection that might lead us down acceptance and lead us down our like diffusion piece, and like all of these other areas are combined. I think the hardest part about the programming is really having a different lens and having the experience in working with that population, because there's things that, like, I have a background in accepting and commitment therapy that's helped me a lot with this population. We have trainings on like reflection, and we have like, like those types of things like are really helpful to kind of like build your toolbox. I also have a lot of experience with like severe maladaptive behaviors and how to replace those and like creative ways in which to do that. And even so, now like me and somebody who helps me with the program kind of are looking at like, okay, well, now we need a little bit more of like some trauma informed care, right? Or maybe we need a little bit more of a background in like not practicing as like a talk therapist, right? But just a background on like some other things that they might be learning or experiencing because of like the mental illness piece.
Yeah. I'm sure you're working on your degree in that now, right?
Yeah, I
mean, if you know her, she's gonna, I need that. Let's go get it.
Yeah, I mean, you would think, I mean, I'm definitely doing like the trainings and like what I need to do.
I'm totally kidding, but I'm not
like out of my scope, right?
Yeah,
like I'm doing the things that I need to do, and there's always like continued like development in anything that you do, in my opinion. Yeah. And I mean, oops,
where did it go?
I don't know.
It's probably on the bottom. I hope you guys can still see
there
us.
We go.
There we are. Our screen disappeared. All right.
I'll just take that feature off from there. Yeah, I mean, I think that I've actually gone more down the route in like with education as far as like the law.
I was just gonna say, I know laws. I'm actually very interested in a lot of stuff like that too, now that I'm kind of involved with that. But yeah, that's really interesting, because what I'm hearing too, as you're talking about, okay, then I went down this, and then we realized acceptance, and we realized this. Like my brain, because you pull it all back, you see the big picture. I think, okay, let's go back to when they're younger and let's start teaching that sooner.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I see. And so I think that is what is life changing. So when you are a provider that only works with 2 to 4, 2 to 5 year olds, let's say, how do you know? Because you're not looking at the big picture, and you really can't unless you do it, and unless you're just doing a template of this is what you do based off of what they told me to do, because do you know what I'm saying?
And we can easily do that. I mean, we can easily take our assessments and say, okay, they need to do all these things, and like pull that in, and that's what we work on. But that's not treating that individual.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say that, yeah, if they could start working on those things a little bit younger. A lot of times what I'm seeing is that they might have a traumatic experience when they were younger in childhood, and will not be able to communicate about that. And it might be communicated through like maladaptive behaviors.
Makes sense.
And we won't until later on in their life realize what had happened and what that was. And then you treat it much later because you didn't know.
So are you talking about abuse and stuff like
Mhm.
that? Yeah. Because I don't have the stats in front of me, but I know it's pretty high. Isn't it like 60%?
It's pretty high, yeah.
So I think that, well, one, that's a huge issue. And why we, meaning Sonnenberg, are creating kind of a diagnosis to adults, because the hope would be that we can help with that from the beginning. We know that it's a safe place too. Like that's, I think, is really important. When kids are moved all over, which happens a lot, because their needs aren't met here, then they go here and here and here. And so that the chances of that opening up just keep growing as far as abuse, whether that's mental, physical, sexual. So I think that's another thing that we're very driven, meaning you and I and our teams are really driven by that, because we really want that safety and that safe place and that continued care. So that's awesome. I mean, I think that's really, really helpful. Is there anything else you want to say about that piece or about programming in general that you think is important?
I mean, teaching them earlier in the sense of building independence is probably like, if that's all that we get to, that's really important. Because once you are an adult, and just like myself, like there's things that I'm set in my ways. Like this is how I do something because this is how I was taught my whole life how to do it. And that's really hard to like shape into something different. So if we shape our clients and the individuals we work with, like to do something a certain way or to require all these prompts and these types of supports, sometimes that's more challenging to fade the older that they get.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole point of early intervention, right?
Yeah.
Because it's less time of less shaped behavior, or of ingrained behavior, or just behavior in general. So I think that's a good point. Okay, well, that's great. I think it's really helpful to hear all of that, because I don't think it's thought about much, or as much as it should be. And then also just being aware, like it changes. You become an adult. You're, adults and teenagers and still have the desires that, everyone does. I think that's very much overlooked. I also think, it's very easy. I don't want to put words, but from what I've seen, from my perspective, it's easy to think, oh, they don't have those desires. They don't care about dating. They don't have all the sexual stuff that occurs with a typically developing teenager or neurotypical teenager. And that's not true.
It's definitely not true. They have all of those things. And what makes it challenging is that some of the areas that are not the same, such as like maybe how they communicate. Okay. But they go through all of the same milestones as any like adolescent does with puberty, any adult who has any limitations to any sort of like independence or things that they want to do or ways that they can like provide for themselves. They have all of those same things going on, and on top of that, limitations, which like talk about mental illness. I mean, if you told me that I couldn't go to work and I couldn't support myself, I would be pretty depressed about that. And that happens sometimes. And some of these individuals can do those things pretty independently, but don't have the opportunity to, because there's not enough out there. Like I have an individual too that I work with who I think could really like have a job, but he would require a job that didn't necessarily like include a lot of like extra stimulus in the environment. So maybe people not noises, not a bunch of people walking in and out of the room. Like you have to kind of find the right placement, which can be hard when it's not offered. And I think we're getting better. There's a lot of like, especially in the vocational realm, there's a lot more out there, but it's how do we teach? Because you could get a job and then you let's say you have a boss or manager or whatever, and the boss lets you go because you spend an hour in the bathroom every day. but they don't know that you spend an hour in the bathroom every day because you got distracted on your phone, or because like you were having a panic attack, or because you don't know how to do the task and you don't know how to ask for help. And so you retreat to like what you know. And I don't know. I mean, in that regard, it's kind of like it's sad. I think there's something to say about not just like providing jobs for individuals with disabilities or abilities, I like to say. Also, the people that are managing those companies, training or like mentorship around that.
It's education.
It's education.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's funny. This is a little bit sidetracked, but you were just saying abilities. You know, it's interesting because for me, it's like alternative abilities or different abilities. You know, so like I'm seeing a lot of change even with the language.
Yeah.
I just saw that a high school that's out by me, they don't say special ed teacher anymore. They say alternative teaching. So you see it, and that's like, I hadn't heard that one yet. So, I mean, I'm seeing many different things. So we're becoming more aware for sure.
Yes.
And just aware of like the sensitivity that can occur, and more communication of not making somebody feel like they're whatever that is, you know? Yeah. So I do think that's really good.
So I mean, like, but picture like not being in this field, not knowing what you know, not having children that have any sort of like additional needs, or you don't have to teach them a different way. Like pretend like you don't have any of that, and you now are in a workplace. Like how do you learn? Like how do you get that education, and how do you even ask for that education when you don't know what you don't know, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that's, I don't know, I think that's where sometimes when like we also have to kind of work with our adults on like these like pre-vocational skills and do that in like a safe space before we generalize it, because not everyone's aware.
Yeah.
And you can't necessarily like expect everyone to be aware. Do I want them to be? Absolutely. But put yourselves in their shoes too.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Well, and you look at, let's talk about schools, right? The burnout is 2 years for alternative education in general. So that's the stats. It's probably even more now because everybody's understaffed. I was just talking to one of our former parents, and she's a sub now. And she said she could work 100 times what she is if there was that many hours in the day, because there's spots open everywhere. And that's teaching in general, but especially in this area. So it's really hard, especially after 2020, 2021, you know, all the burnout is just insane. So now you have that, who are the people that are getting educated in that. And not even the way that we're educated. It's different even in that field, but it's still education. It's still, you know, acceptance and awareness and all of that. And now that's being bottlenecked.
Yeah.
So in society I want to say they are being forced in some areas, because otherwise you get into other litigations and things like that, which helps, but it's still like you want awareness and acceptance in a way that is comforting and, you know, pushing.
Now, because you have to.
Yes. So it's tough, definitely. And we're seeing some of that. So I'm excited to see in a couple of years, hopefully settling a little bit more and working through some of this stuff, because teaching and teachers and therapists and everything in this field is, I mean, it's so needed.
Yeah.
I mean, we're only getting more and more, you know, need, you know, as we move forward here. So I think that the awareness. So what makes you love this kind of area? Like what really makes this so motivating to you?
Yeah, honestly, when I look back on my career, like when I first started in ABA, you could have asked me then if I would have worked with adults, and I would have said no. even my undergrad is in teaching, and I purposely didn't become a teacher for older. I did early childhood on purpose because I was like, there's no way I'm working
fascinating
with teenagers like how I was when I was a teenager. Like, there's no way.
I don't want me.
And I don't know. And then I just, like you get the couple clients, right? And you're like, yeah, I'm going to try this. I guess I would ask people to be open to experiences because I didn't know, you don't know what you don't know. And I never knew that I would love like the adolescent population, the adult population until I had like one or two experiences with individuals that either were older and displayed a lot of like maladaptive behaviors or like older and were working on like more vocational type things. And I fell in love with how their mind works and how I could help.
Yeah.
Because I mean, your heart kind of like breaks a little bit because you know that they can like do something, and they might not know that or might not know how. And sometimes all it takes is like us to teach a skill in just like a slightly different way, or provide that written step-by-step instruction for them with simple instructions, and they can complete like they can run a coffee shop.
Yeah, that's awesome. Or make a shirt, or there's so many things.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
I found through my research something like really interesting is, so what a lot of people do is like when they do research like this, they look at like more of like the task analysis end of things, like how to teach. I worked more on how to motivate. So I didn't work on like, okay, most of them actually already kind of knew like the task at hand. Like I didn't really have to teach the task. What I wanted to teach was how do I motivate them to continue. Because in my experience, what I found is like they would know how to like take a coffee order, for example, or know how to make the coffee. But they would like stop halfway through, or they just like weren't motivated. They looked miserable. Like, and I'm like, I don't want you to do a job that makes you miserable. Like you still have to have some like fulfillment, just like we all do. And so I was like, well, how do I motivate? And so I used some different techniques to do that rather than teaching the task through different like prompting avenues. And stuff.
Yeah, I
interesting.
Like that is interesting because it's always that intrinsic motivation. Like it's always like, why do you want to do this? Why do I want to do this? Like, what is the point? You know? So I think that's super important. I love that. I think it's the whole spectrum and the whole diagnosis to adult and independent living. I mean, that's the goal, right? Is to be independent. Which then, how are you independent?
Independent and connection. Humans want connection.
Yeah. And everyone in some way. It looks different for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, even like I have clients that like they want to be in the room all day and they want to play video games all day. And there's nothing wrong with that. Guess what? They're still connecting. Yeah. Because all the video games
are with usually
other people.
Yep. Yep.
So they're still connecting. They're connecting in a different way. Yeah. But then how do you use, what's really interesting to me is how do you use that avenue to make other connections?
Yeah. Those pairing of things, right?
Yes.
So connecting, pairing to another, something that makes them even more independent or connecting in some other area.
And that's why technology is also involved in my research because of that.
That was the texting?
Yes.
Yeah. Love that. It's great. I just thought of James. Sorry, James. I'm not going to use him as an example because it's a good example. But you were talking about how if somebody would have asked you years ago, would you have been doing this? I just thought of James because when he started with us, he's like, I don't know anything about this, that, or whatever. And now he's reaching out and he's like, I love it. Can I be safety cared? Did you know that?
Yeah, I Yeah.
I mean, it's scary, I think. The unknown
It's very,
and the uncomfortable, being uncomfortable, as we talked
Mhm.
about, is scary. And once you dip your toe in, you realize it's not so scary.
Mhm.
It really is. Everybody wants to connect. Everybody hasn't, like, there's really not a lot of difference as far as the goal of being independent and connecting and wanting relationships. It's
Mhm.
really all the same. It just
It's how
looks,
it's how it looks. It's how, like, I think the people I've come across that are really like great with this population are people that can demonstrate like self-reflection, humility.
oh yes,
Um,
humility,
yeah, I mean, open,
vulnerability.
yeah, like being open to the challenge, being able to live in the uncomfortable. Like those are the people that will take the second to be like, I hear what you're saying, and let me help you figure it out. Not I'm going to do this
Yeah.
for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a difference in that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. It's great. Learning is, it's so fun, but you've got to feel comfortable and with the uncomfortable. I mean, really, that's my favorite, I think, phrase at the moment is it's okay. Like, be uncomfortable. It's okay. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. You know, that's how you, and that's easy. It's easier to reflect when you're like, I have no idea what just happened. That's okay. Like, reflect and take baby steps. My favorite thing to always say too is don't look at the whole staircase. Look at what's in front of you and get that step and then look at the next step, and you just keep going up the stairs. If you look at the whole staircase, it's very overwhelming and it's very easy to fall apart.
Mhm.
For me, that's my perspective. I think it's easier to break it down. That's why you have task analysis and all the breaking it all down, because then you can do it. Makes sense, right? It's what we've always done. So very cool. Do you have anything else to say about, motivation, why you're doing this? I'm trying to just see here. Yeah.
I'm motivated to also in big picture thinking what this could be.
Yeah.
Because I also know that not every Scylla is a great environment for some individuals. Not every residential facility is a great environment.
What's a Scylla?
A Scylla is a home that individuals can live in. They have a room.
Okay.
So depending on like the size of the home, would determine like how many individuals could like live in that home.
Okay.
So
if you got a facility or a home, it could be any home, right? Just a regular home.
Yeah, in fact, there's some like contingencies in which the home cannot be like noticeable to the community as a Scylla.
Okay.
So it does have to be like a home in a neighborhood or like just home. Like you can't like advertise that this is a Scylla,
Oh, okay. So then you get a home. And what does that look like? And then why or why not would that be good for some individuals but not others?
Yeah. I mean, it would determine their needs, really. Like you might be looking at more of like a residential facility if there's more like maybe medical pieces or more like high magnitude problem behaviors, or maybe there's like a larger safety concern.
So somewhere with more of a support system.
Yeah,
right?
Like the Scyllas, you have like a around the clock like person coming in and out of that and supporting these individuals and maybe like providing them with like their medications or whatever. They might have like rules or like kind of contingencies to like what they can and cannot do. Versus like a residential might be more restricting, but that's based on like their need.
Got it. So a Scylla could be what, 1, 2, 3 people?
Usually like up to like 3 people. And again, they have all of these like depends on the house, depends on the square footage, depends on the rooms, depends on all of these things. Also depending on because they try to like pair individuals up in like a certain way too. Like you wouldn't have, and they could be of all disabilities too. It's not like autism,
Okay.
you know.
But they have to match is kind of
they
what
kind of
saying,
have to
right?
like match.
Like mesh together.
Like
so
they try to do that, like
Okay.
where they'll mesh together, where they kind of, because like if you put a individual who doesn't maybe display high magnitude problem behaviors with someone that triggers them, then they're going to display high magnitude behaviors, right? And then it's not safe for anyone in that environment. Now, sometimes that happens. I mean, I've heard terrible stories.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Usually I hear those stories when I go to my safety care trainings.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So then somebody's in that syllab that is around just one person or two people. Like, how does that work? Let's say if you have 3 people in a house, it's still, how does that work with staff wise?
Yeah, so it wouldn't necessarily be like a one-on-one situation. Like you would have like, then it would be like a 1-on-3 kind of thing. And maybe there might be 2 people, or there might be like one caregiver and like one like case manager there, you know, and they kind of like, they have their shifts, but it's like all night. So they would have like a first, second, third shift.
Got it.
And then the case manager would kind of come in like as needed. Usually the case manager has many homes to like manage and like go around to.
Okay. And how is that funded?
I only know about Illinois' funding, but it's that you basically get like through like their Medicaid and all that. Like those providers will give you like a stipend. Like they basically like pay for like that room.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense.
And I believe it's been a while since I've taken that training, but I believe like it's like a year. Like you get this amount for like a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So are you more motivated by like a SILA, like a 1, 2, 3 house situation, or are you more motivated by a residential, or you don't know?
I've always envisioned, so I've heard about like Boys Town a really long time ago. And so I've always kind of envisioned like a community. So like homes that also have like the coffee shop and also have the store and also have, so like how you could start that is you buy a building that also has like land. Okay. And then you build like around that.
Oh, and keep adding.
And then
so you would have got it. So that's cool.
Like you could buy a house on like 5 acres, right? And then you just start.
And then you keep that's fun. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really fun. Okay.
Some neighborhoods do that actually. I think there's one that is kind of being built like that. There's a couple that are kind of being built like that right now in this area.
I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, that would be the completion.
Yeah.
That would really,
that to me is completion.
That would be because you would have all of that support, all of that area. You could do jobs. You could, right? Is that how you're thinking of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like that.
And it's like this safe space, right? Because they know that you go to this grocery store, like
yeah. Oh my gosh, it's like a little community, like a little. Yeah. Wow, that would be amazing.
I envision an euphoria too.
Is there going to be like a massage and you get your hair done and like there's free stuff for the workers or whatever?
I mean, there could be anything. And you know, like it's open to the community, right? But it's like,
right. But it's their safe space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I really like that.
And as a parent, like just think about like I'm sending my
I love it.
Kid here. Like I know that they're gonna be safe and that they can meet all of their needs in like this one spot.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Really. Well, coming soon. Mm-hmm. Just wait. So that's the future part that we were talking about is kind of what we have, what we're continuing to build, and what will be coming. So we're really excited about that. Just watch out. So we'll be doing some of that. Is there anything else that we missed or that you'd like to talk about or just comment on? Or do you think we've captured everything for the most part?
I think we captured everything. I mean, the last thing I will say is to when you're offered the experience, take it,
Yeah.
because it can bring you many different.
Well, and I mean, look at how much your life, my life, our life has changed based
Mhm.
off of being comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Mhm.
because I feel uncomfortable all the time. You accept it. You almost, for me, I'm like, let's bring it on. Let me feel that so I can be present in that and work through it. And you work through it together, and we're in the constant. My motivation is to constantly learn and acceptance and awareness of everything, so I just, everyone, because it only helps me grow as a person too. It's a little selfishness, I want to grow as a person too. I want to help my kids. I want to help my family. I want to help the community, because we all impact each other. So I think that's really important. So yeah, I think that's great. We continue to grow and learn here too. So one of the things that we would love to do in the future is we're going to bring on some guest speakers, and we're really excited about that. Nasia and Scott, or Nasia for sure, said that they would join us. If we get Scott, that'd be great too. That's my shout out to you. To talk a lot about what they have, so much knowledge. They're really our mentors. So I would love to have them come on and speak about a bunch of things. There's so many things we could speak to them about. We have some other people we're really interested in. If there's anybody that you all are interested, all 28 subscribers, just wait. We only had 2 at one point, so we're growing, and we haven't been on in a while. So
that's good.
We would love to hear from you. You can email us. We have an email here, or just if you know our email, we're happy to, or call us or whatever. We'd love to hear about that, because we are definitely going to have some, different people and more guest speakers. We've had some on in the past, so we can kind of hit those areas and grow ourselves, really.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you guys, anybody that's listening, and have a good week. See you later.